IB Nation, welcome back to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast brought to you by FanDuel. Happy Wednesday, everybody. We are going to be diving into the matchups that matter today for the Notre Dame versus NC State game happening this Saturday inside of Notre Dame Stadium. 3:30 p.m. kickoff in the dreaded Peacock-only game. I know that's been a hot topic of discussion. But before we dive into things today, Brian, I know we have an announcement coming, just talking about some format changes.
Yeah, so Trev and I were talking today a lot about the show, the makeup of the show, and kind of, you know, what how we do things and what we're doing and stuff like that. And I didn't love sort of the layout that we had gone with, that I chose for this year. I didn't love it. I don't want to put that like Trevor was out here, you know, he's the reason for why I didn't love the layout of the show. And so what we're gonna do is, especially as we get closer and closer to the college football playoffs, because we're going to talk more about that, whether Notre Dame is part of that or not. But we're going to kind of change the format of what we do. So instead of on Wednesday taking like this deep dive into the opponent and then talking about some matchups, we're going to spend a little bit more time on Tuesday doing a little bit more into the opponent. And then Wednesday, we're going to start off with really breaking down the matchups to watch. Like when you're watching this game, these are the matchups that we think are going to have the biggest impact. So it's going to be a Notre Dame standpoint, and then specific to the opponent, we'll do one for offense, do one for defense. And then we're going to move our keys to victory to the beginning of, or to the second part of this show. So today we're going to do our keys to victory. And then tomorrow on Thursday, and this will be this week and then in future weeks, we're going to have like a different segment at the beginning, or we may go keys. Tomorrow we're going to go keys to victory first, or excuse me, game predictions and game record predictions first. And tomorrow we're going to have a long segment after that previewing this weekend of college football, because there's just so many great games. And we'll talk first about games that impact Notre Dame, and then we'll kind of get into the big national games. And we kind of like that idea. And Trev brought up an idea that could really work for Thursday about kind of having a second segment that has some different areas where maybe we talk about a different angle of the game. We talk about maybe what to look for in the game. How are we going to know if Notre Dame's playing well? And then when we get into deeper kind of into November and the playoffs become a bigger factor, if assuming Notre Dame is in the playoff conversation, it's too early to do that now. Doing sort of a, what are the games to watch for that are going to have the biggest impact for Notre Dame this weekend before we do our college football preview. So we're going to mix that up a little bit, and I'm kind of excited about it, Trev. And so Tuesday, Thursday will be really just breaking the game down, really diving into the game, and then Thursday it's prediction time. And I just think that format works a little bit better than keys to victory, then immediately jumping into predictions and going from there. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to give us a chance to maybe talk a little bit more college football on the Thursday show, which is going to be interesting. Instead of picking like this weekend, it's like we pick 2-3 games to break down, and then a bunch of others that are they're going to include like Alabama against Missouri, and you know, these ranked versus ranked games. And so we just felt it would be a lot more fun for us and a lot more fun for you guys to kind of do it this way. And then we also give a little bit more of the really meaty Notre Dame stuff on Wednesday, as opposed to just strictly focusing on the opponent. So we're going to still make sure you guys know your opponent. You got to know thy enemy. But this way we're going to still make it a little bit more Notre Dame centric. And I think that's going to be something that's going to work better for you guys and be a lot more fun for us.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get this new format started. I think it's going to flow better throughout the week. But at the end of the day, as long as you and I still get to sit down and talk some Notre Dame football, and then Thursdays talk some college football, I'm a happy camper at the end of the day. But Brian, let's get this segment of the show started. And part one of today's show, we're talking about the matchups that matter. And we're going to talk, obviously, two different sides of the ball: Notre Dame's offense, Notre Dame's defense. And there are some highlight matchups that we want everybody to keep an eye on. I mean, I know Brian and I will be watching these under a microscope on Saturday. We'll start with Notre Dame's offense. And I think it's easy to just look at NC State's defense and look what they've given up throughout the season and say, if Notre Dame's offense just, plays Notre Dame offensive football, then they'll be fine. May be true. But there are some individual matchups that we're going to talk about, Brian, and some of them live along the offensive line. Actually, the first two do. And the first one that we're going to talk about is Notre Dame center Ashton Craig combined with the two offensive guards, Billy Schrouth and Gerby Lambert, against NC State's best interior defensive lineman, which is Brandon Cleveland. He is a 6'4", 315-pound interior defensive lineman. He'll line head up over the center. He will line up over both guards. They do a little bit of movement with him. This is a very, very important matchup to keep your eye on Saturday, Brian.
It really is, Trevor. I have a philosophy about if you want to be successful, you have to win up the middle, and that's true. I don't say if you want to be successful on offense or if you want to be successful on defense. It's just if you want to be successful in football, you got to win up the middle. And for the most part, Notre Dame's done a pretty good job of that this year. I think even against Miami, I don't think it was the middle that hurt Notre Dame. I think that's where Notre Dame kind of found some of their success with the quarterback runs and some of the runs they did have were inside of the edge players. Where Notre Dame got whooped in that game was on the edge. And I think the interior of the offensive line this year has been pretty good. We've had some issues with the tackles at times, but I think the interior of the offensive line has been pretty good. But this is a different kind of matchup, and you could throw Travali Price in there, although he hasn't taken the jump that I thought he was going to take or could take this season. He's been okay, but Brandon Cleveland's their dude, and he's the kind of player that if you don't have him, if you don't contain him, he can do some serious damage to your football team. And he can definitely do some damage to your run game, just completely throw off the timing. Because the reason it's important for an offense to be successful up the middle, pass game, it's obvious. You don't want the pocket being collapsed into your quarterback. But run game-wise, if you're getting a push in the A or B gaps, then it throws off the timing of your run game. So mid-zone is Notre Dame's most impactful play. The aiming point's the inside hip of the tackle. But it's a run that can bounce, go vertical, and cut back. So there was a great question on the board yesterday about Mike Denbrock in the past has been a heavy inside zone guy. He was a big inside zone guy at Notre Dame. They don't really run a ton of pure inside zone at Notre Dame now. They run more this duo tight zone type thing, and then they run their bread and butter plays mid zone, which is more of a stretch play. So why do you think that is? I said, well, I think part of it is because with the backs they have, you want a run play that has more options because these are guys that can bounce. Josh Adams wasn't a bouncer, like as a runner. He was a downhill cutback runner. He wasn't a guy who was going to quickly bounce around outside. Josh was fast and he could plant and go, but Josh wasn't a twitchy guy that could make a jump cut and go outside the way Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love can. So what mid zone gives you that inside zone does not is it gives you a three-way point of insertion. Bounce, vertical, cutback. But what you don't want to be in a situation to do is bounce because you got beat up the middle, because that's when you're going to flow to the ball and you don't have anything. And what you also don't want to do is cut back because your guard or center got driven 3-4 yards into the backfield. Because now once a running back cuts, he has now declared to the defense, this is where I'm going. And so the sooner you can make a back declare where he's going, the sooner the rest of your defense can rally to the football. And then also when Notre Dame does run their downhill stuff, their duo, their tight zone, their counter stuff that's meant to be more of a, inside hitting play, if you're getting whooped up the middle, then that there's just nowhere to go. And so Brandon Cleveland is the kind of game wrecker. If we're doing an NC State show and we're talking about game wreckers, who needs to be a game wrecker, this is the first name that we're bringing up. Brandon Cleveland. And he's having a pretty good season, Trev. And he's an interesting player because, and I'll let you talk about this because, I know you and I see this the same way we were talking about before the show, but when he's on, he's a force. Problem is he's not always on. But I have a feeling that this is going to be one of those games that he's going to be a little bit more locked in than normal.
The phrase that you and I both dislike kind of come into play when we talk about Brandon Cleveland. And, we hear all the time about, Notre Dame gets everybody's best. And it's like, yes, big picture, you're right, but I don't love what that comment insinuates.
It's factually inaccurate.
Agreed. But with that being said, I do.
They didn't get Arkansas's best shot. They didn't,
no,
you know
sure
what I mean? Like,
no, sure.
They didn't get Boise's best shot. Yeah.
No. But that being said, these are the kind of games where the Brandon Clevelands of the world, the hot and cold players, typically tend to run hot. It's going to be, you're on a national stage. It's a top 20 opponent. It's Notre Dame in South Bend. And
O-line you.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're going to put on an NFL highlight reel, Notre Dame inside of Notre Dame Stadium against Notre Dame's offensive line is the team that you would typically want to do that against. And that's kind of what Brandon Cleveland has at stake. I mean, how many times have we seen players that are they run hot and cold throughout the season, then they play Notre Dame, and for whatever reason, they turn into an all-conference player? And that could be what Brandon Cleveland, that's the opportunity that he has in front of him. You look at his numbers, and he's fourth on the team in pressures, but a lot of those were generated against, not high-level opponents. He has, I believe, like 10 run stops on the season. So he's somebody that has the ability. When you go and you put on the film, he has the ability to blow up run plays. Brian, you talk about it all the time. When you're coaching running backs, or if you're coaching running backs, you don't want them making their first move 3 yards in the backfield. That's what lack of integrity up the middle does to you, where electric running backs like a Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price are forced to make their first move 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage, not 3 to 4 yards past the line of scrimmage. Now, the bright thing, the bright side about Notre Dame's offensive line is they have now gone up against several different types of interior players, to the Justin Scotts and the Cameron Balls of the world, to the Braxton Feelys, like the quick little slasher, not little, but the not 6'5", 387 pound defensive tackles in Braxton Feely. So Notre Dame's interior has seen all different kinds, but they can't let this be the game where Brandon Cleveland has his welcome to college football 2025 moment. This matchup is going to be huge.
And the thing about Brandon Cleveland, you talk about the number of run stops he has. It's 10. He's on pace to be a little bit more than he had last year. He had 18 last year. But when you look at the way he plays, he's not the one that's designed to make the run stops. He's the one that's meant to blow up the box and let the linebackers fly to the ball. And so when you look at the the PFF numbers, like you were talking about, Trev, their two leaders in run stops, or their top leader in run stops, is Caden Fordham, who has 29 in only 6 games, which is a lot. But a big part of that is him fitting in right in behind Brandon Cleveland, and him doing the dirty work, and then Cade Fordham comes in behind him and cleans up for it. So that's the impact that he has. And I think if he's able to kind of have the game like he did against Duke, if you watch the Duke game, you're thinking, dude, you're pointing to the Duke game. Well, the rest of the defense wasn't very good against Duke, but Brandon Cleveland was a monster that game. He had 4 pressures, 5 run stops. He was just dominating Duke up the middle. This is the kind of game, as Trevor said, he's going to be like, look, you want to ask an NFL scout, what's the first game that you're going to look at in 2025 for Brandon Cleveland? It's either going to be Miami or Notre Dame. And what's the second game? The other one. Like, this is one of those games that NFL scouts it's going to be one of the first games they queue up. They're not going to queue up the Duke game where you went off. They're going to want to see how you win against Notre Dame, because they know Notre Dame's got multiple NFL players in the middle of their offensive line. They want to see how you handled Ashton Craig, who's going to be drafted in a couple of years. They want to see how you handled Gerby Lambert, who's a big-time talent. How did you handle Billy Shrout, who's going to be a draft pick in a year or two? And then they're going to want to go see how you played against Miami. That's what they're going to care about. And kids know that. And they know that stuff. And so you're going to get Brandon Cleveland's best effort. And look, Trev, this is a guy that was on my preseason all-opponent team. I can't remember if he was on yours or not. I know we both talked about liking him, but this isn't a kid that's come out of nowhere. Yeah, he was on your second team as well. So, I mean, this is a big-time player. This is a big-time player.
The next matchup that matters for Notre Dame, we're sticking along the offensive line, but we're kicking it to the exterior. And would it really be a matchups that matter segment in the show if we didn't talk about Notre Dame's left tackle, Anthony Knapp? But in all seriousness, this is another matchup that matters. And Anthony Knapp is coming off of a good performance against Boise State. Mm-hmm. He and Emil Wagner were, really too. Yeah, agreed.
I thought he was pretty good against Arkansas as well.
Yeah, I think so too. It's Boise State. He took a really big step in the right direction against Arkansas and looked to play his first complete game really as a left tackle against Boise State. Steps in the right direction. Can you follow that up against their best edge rusher, Sebastian Harsh, who currently leads the team in tackles for a loss and pressures and sacks? That is going to be another big matchup. 54 is going to have to handle business on Saturday.
It's a game where, and you talk about, going against Sebastian Harsh, you could probably throw in Keun Sloan in this conversation as well. The reason that I went more with Harsh is because the concern I have in this game for Notre Dame is going to be the pass rush. And it's a different type of pass rush. Harsh and Sloan are a little different than what Notre Dame faced against Arkansas, for example. They're a little bit more, I don't say twitchy because I wouldn't say they're twitchy, but they're a little bit more athletic edge rushers as opposed to the power rushers that Arkansas had. I thought Anthony Knapp did a great job against Jaden Virgin Morgan last week when he was matched up against him. And he is better than anybody that NC State has, in my opinion. But they're more similar to him. So this is an example of, okay, is Anthony Knapp, because we pointed to in the film breakdowns we did, you and I pointed to it against Arkansas, and then Vince and I pointed to it against in the film that we broke down for the message board for premium members. We said, look at Anthony Knapp's footwork here. That's different. That's not what he was doing when he was getting in trouble. Look at his base. Look at his sink in his butt. Look at how he's engaging. Look at the patience he's showing. Those were improvements compared to where he was earlier in the season when he struggled, and certainly from where he was last year. And now that's got to continue. And that's going to be the big key. You're the left tackle. That's got to continue. Is that just sort of he did well in 2 games against teams that aren't great pass rushing defenses? Or is this the sort of the new normal for Anthony Knapp? And the more consistently he does this, like there was a stretch last year where Anthony Knapp was pretty good in the pass game. But if you go break those film down, he wasn't really a whole lot better. The teams they were playing had no pass rushers that could really do anything against him or anybody else. And then we got to the postseason and he struggled again in pass pro. What I'm saying now, I think can translate more effectively against better players if he can continue it. And this is a game where I think he's going to be challenged in a way that's maybe a little bit more of a challenge than he did the last couple of weeks, because the one thing that NC State's going to do that Boise really didn't is they're going to throw more games at the tackle. Where Boise, all Boise's pressures were like up the middle. They were more putting an impact on Gerby and Ashton Craig and Billy Schrouf. Whereas this is a team that's going to try to do more to influence your tackles. And how does Anthony Knapp handle that? If he can play a good game in the pass game, then Notre Dame should be okay. But also, one of the things we're talking about the keys to victory is going to be the ability to run the mid zone and the outside zone and things like that. And Anthony's going to play a big role at the point of attack in that matchup as well. And that's the one thing he has been dominant doing is running the football. That's been true. I mean, we said it this summer, Trev. This is why I get frustrated with some of the Anthony Knapp conversations that go on. It's because like there's these extremes on both sides where people want to ignore all the bad games. It's like, well, he played well against this team, so we should ignore all the games where he didn't play well. And then there's the people in the act like he's never done anything well or he's not a good player. Shouldn't he be starting at Notre Dame? Yeah, he should be starting, just not at left tackle. Because the reason why we say that, because he's been a dominant run blocker since the first game of his career. Like that's something he's been very good at. That's going to be a big impact in this game too. But I'm not concerned with that part of the game. When he doesn't run block well, it's like, whoa, what happened there? And then we talk about it. It's never like I don't know if he's going to be able to run block well in this game. It's the pass rush that's going to be the key.
Agreed. He's going to have to continue ascending and holding his own. The last matchup that we're going to talk about on offense that matters is tight end Eli Raridan against linebacker Sean Brown and safety Ronnie Royal. Brian, you and I were talking before the show, and we both believe that this game kind of has Eli Raridan written all over it.
I think so, yeah. And so just a little nugget on Sean Brown. Trevor and I were trying to find if there was any official word from NC State if he was going to be out this week, and we haven't been able to find anything. He missed last week's game. He got hurt against Virginia Tech. I don't think it was major. Our opinion, we don't know this for a fact, our opinion is he sat out last week because it was Campbell. And it was like, let's get him healthy and let's make sure he's good to go for Notre Dame. But we don't know that for a fact. He hasn't been listed as out. But I anticipate him playing. And then if it's not him, then it's whoever replaces him in the starting lineup. Might be Caden Fordham. If it's Caden Fordham, then that's really a matchup you need to go after because he's not nearly as athletic as Sean Brown is. But the reason it's these two players is because when you watch how NC State lines up, when Eli is into the boundary running in a two-man look, a lot of times you can have Ronnie Royal on him. And there'll be times when he's to the field he'll have Sean Brown on him, and they use Sean Brown a lot in coverage. So he's going to be matched up against Eli Raritan. And this is one of those games where I really feel like Notre Dame has to be able to do more over the middle of the field and on some of the level stuff. And yeah, you can hit the outside receivers on some of those things. But what I've noticed about how Penn State does coverage is if you're running like digs and in cuts, they drive relatively well with their safeties on that stuff. There's times they'll just blow a coverage and you can get those guys open. But if they're playing sound coverage, they do a good job of closing. I like the idea of running some vertical stuff to take the safeties off and then getting Eli matched up on the intermediate stuff with digs and overs and seams against the linebacker and then the other safety. So I think if they can do that, then Notre Dame's going to have a shot to hit some big plays to the tight end. And then they're not a very disciplined defense. They will turn guys loose. So I think, we've seen Notre Dame run some post wheels and some different things like that. Maybe some screen game to Eli Raritan. I think this might be a game where the tight end screen game might have a little something. But I think this is a game where that's a matchup that Notre Dame has to take advantage of. And if they're able to hit a couple plays to Eli Raritan early, and then I also think there's some chain moving plays. You're running some of the option routes and things like that to on 3rd and 4. But if CJ's able to, or if the offense is able to get Eli going early, then now all of a sudden your safeties have to pay more attention to him. And now that's when maybe some of your outside stuff can open up, because they do a better job than the teams they've played so far of buzzing underneath the outs and the comebacks that Notre Dame likes to hit. And so Notre Dame's gonna have to find some ways to, now assuming that they may change their coverage and just play quarters all day, because they will play some quarters. Quarters coverage, by the way, we had somebody ask this question, and it's a fair thing to say. It's basically everybody's playing a quarter of the field. So cover 2 is everybody's playing the deep safeties are playing a half of the field. Cover 3 is they're playing a third of the field safety, and then the 2 corners, or if it's a roll, like a cover 3, roll coverage, cloud coverage, or sky coverage, then it's a corner and 2 safeties playing a deep third. Quarters is everybody's got a quarter of the field. There's 2 different ways to play it. One is sort of a softer, everybody's kind of sinking, preventing the big play. You don't want to give up a big play, keep everything in front of you type of defense. It's a very much a bend but don't break type of coverage structure. And your linebacker to the boundary is going to have kind of curl flat, and then your nickel or field, Sam linebacker, if you're in a 4-3, will have curl flat. I don't love old school quarters unless you're just, you're up by 3 touchdowns and you just don't want them to hit a big play. So you're willing to give up a bunch of 8-yard stops, because then they're going to have to do that 6-7 times and take 3-4 minutes off clock. The other type of quarters is more of a modern quarters, the last 15, 20 years especially. And it's the same thing against the pass, but at the snap, both safeties step down. And if they run the ball, then they keep coming downhill. Because one of in the old school quarters, one of the disadvantages is if you could run the ball, it's harder to get as many hats into the box because they're 4 guys deep. This type of quarters, they will step down. If they see run, then they will keep running, keep coming down, and that's a way to get some extra hats against the run. And they will do some of that, but they don't do a ton of that, or at least they haven't on film from what I've seen. That could be an adjustment they go to against Notre Dame, however, where they run more quarters as opposed to just going single high and getting that extra guy down, because the problem that teams that have played Notre Dame so far is when they just bring an extra hat down to the box, they're getting ripped with the passing game down the field. What NC State could maybe do is like, look, we're going to go quarters and have our safeties kind of coming down to get that extra 7th and 8th guy in the box, and then let the nickel stay out here and defend the slot, and then the corners can kind of play the post. And then, maybe we'll give up some of that other stuff on the outside. They could do that. It wouldn't actually be a terrible idea for them to do that. But either way, all of this puts Eli Raritan in a situation where he's going to have some chances for big plays. And I'm hoping that CJ Carr can start to look for him a little bit more, and they can design, design it. I need to say design a few more things to him. I think there was opportunities to get him the ball last week, as we showed in the film breakdown, that CJ just didn't go to him. On the corner route to Malachi Fields that he threw out of bounds, if he recognizes that they're bracketing Malachi and just comes backside to Eli, he might score. And so they had the 3rd and 20 designed to him, or part of it wasn't designed to him, but he's part of the initial read. for the big play. So I think this is a game where we could see him certainly get more involved.
Well, and unfortunately, I just looked at some numbers, and to put some numbers behind what you're talking about, Brian, it doesn't really matter if it's Sean Brown or Cade Fordham if they're in coverage against Eli Raridon. So far this season, Sean Brown has been targeted 26 times, given up 20 receptions for 256 yards, 178 yards after the catch, and 2 touchdowns. It's not great. And that's Sean Brown. That's the more athletic between the two. And Fordham has been targeted the same amount of times, 26, giving up 19 receptions for 134 yards, 78 yards after the catch, and a touchdown. So this is a matchup that Notre Dame is going to have to continue to take advantage of, like other teams have when their linebackers drop back into coverage. And then same thing with Ronnie Royal, definitely being able to take advantage of what they do from a coverage structure standpoint. Ronnie Royal's been targeted 20 times, giving up 16 receptions for 211 yards, 1 touchdown, and then 1 interception on the season. So definitely one.
And he's also 5'9".
Yeah.
That's part of the reason. And so when he's to the field, I could see him maybe matched up against the linebackers more. But in the boundary, I could see them having Ronnie Royal on him more. And that's a situation where if Eli Raridon's running a slot fade and Ronnie Royal's on him, or if he's running a seam route and Ronnie Royal's on him, throwing the frickin' ball. Put it up at about 8.5 feet and let the former basketball player. And Eli Raridon was a dude on the basketball court. Throw it up to him. Throw him a couple alley-oops and Ronnie Royal's on him. I mean, think about it. What does a point guard do in a basketball game if they're running a fast break and he sees a 5'9" point guard covering his 6'7" center? He's going to throw a lob and let him go bang on that guy. You know what I mean? And that's what I want to see CJ do. And Sean Brown's only 6 feet tall also. That factors into this as well. This is just a matchup that's just built for Notre Dame to exploit. We just don't know if they will, but if they do, that's a big time matchup advantage for the Irish in this game.
Brian, let's talk a little defensive matchups. And we've broken it down into 3 different matchups that we can kind of take a look at and see this is where Notre Dame kind of has to win. And the first one is Christian Gray versus one of Terrell Anderson and Noah Rogers. And NC State plays a lot of different types of pass concepts, and they're not like Notre Dame. They're not specific to boundary field. They will play either side. So the odds are Christian Gray will be matched up amongst one of them. If you go and you look at what it's that they will always be to. So what we've seen so far is Noah Rogers is always to the left of the offense, and Terrell Anderson's onto the right of the offense. Yep, not specific to boundary or field.
Right, which means they're both going to face Christian Gray at times. I might have misunderstood you, Trevor, but but yes. So moral story, it won't be Leonard Moore versus Terrell Anderson and Christian Gray against Noah Rogers. It'll be both of them against both of them.
One thing that I thought was interesting is when you go and you take a look at some of the FanDuel numbers that are out, they have player props that are out now for this game.
I was going to ask you about that, Trev. You read my mind. I was going to ask you what the player prop were for the NC State receivers in this game.
Well, first and foremost, as of right now, and I know it always changes once you get closer to game time, but you can't even bet on Noah Rogers right now. He doesn't have an over-under set. You can bet on him for an anytime touchdown, but you can't bet on him for receiving yards. Terrell Anderson's over-under is set at 40.5. Justin Jolly, NC State's tight end, who we'll talk about here in a little bit, his over-under is set at 45.5, and that is the last. Those are the only 2 NC State pass catchers that you can bet on for player props, which I thought was interesting to say the least. But yes, moral of the story.
Real quick, what's CJ Bailey at before you get to the moral of the story? I'm very curious about that.
Yeah, his CJ Bailey's over-under passing yards is set at 240.5, and his over-under for passing touchdowns is set at over-under 1.5, and it's plus odds if you think he's going to throw 2. So
who's he throwing to? Who's he throwing to?
Apparently one of Justin Jolly or Terrell Anderson. I mean,
if Terrell's at 40, what'd you say Justin Jolly was at?
Justin Jolly was at 45.5 and Terrell Anderson was at 40.5. So
85. Where's the other 160 yards coming from? If you can't even put a prop bet on, what's Keenan Jackson?
You can't bet on him.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah.
So anyway, continue your point.
Yeah, I mean, I was just Christian Gray's going to be matched up on either one. I was just going to talk about the anytime touchdown scorer props too. I mean, they don't think the NC State pass catchers are going to do anything. You can't even. Wow, you can. Oh, you can. So all of NC State's pass catchers are at the bare minimum plus 300 to score an anytime touchdown. Justin Jolly's at plus 300. Terrell Anderson's plus 370. Keenan Jackson's plus 430. Wesley Grimes is plus 490. Noah Rogers is plus 500 to score just a touchdown. So
Okay.
whatever.
All right. I hope they're right. I mean, I
too.
hope they're right. I just okay. All right.
Maybe. But number one on matchup that matters on defense, Christian Gray, like you said, will go up against both Noah Rogers and Terrell Anderson. This is going to be one that Gray's going to have to win.
Yeah, I mean, Trev, you look at their numbers from this game, right? First of all, CJ Bailey does a good job of spreading the ball around. He's not a guy that's going to like lock in on one guy. When you look at the numbers that you've got, Justin Jolly has 28 catches, Terrell Anderson's got 21, Hollywood Smothers got 21, Keenan Jackson's got 17, Noah Rogers has 15, Wesley Grimes has 14. The reason that I point to Noah Rogers and Terrell Anderson is because I think those are the two guys, and Wesley Grimes will do this to a degree, but he doesn't concern me quite as much. But you could throw Wesley Grimes into this conversation, especially if he's healthy. He's a little bit banged up this year. But all three of those guys really, and Keenan Jackson's more of their slot guy. But Wesley will play outside, Noah will play outside, Terrell will play outside. Here's their yards per catch averages this year. Terrell Anderson's at 18.5. Wesley Grimes is at 17.4, and Noah Rogers is at 15.7. And if you look at Terrell Anderson, he's been over 20 yards a catch in he's been at 25 or more in 2 of the last 3 games. He had 6 catches for 166 yards and 2 touchdowns against Duke. And he had 2 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown and basically a half a football against Campbell. And then he was at a 4 for 65 against Virginia Tech. And then you look at Wesley Grimes and what he's been able to do. He didn't play in the Duke game, but in the opener against East Carolina, he had 4 catches for 121 yards. So he's a guy that is more than capable of being a big play weapon for this offense. But then you look at Noah Rogers, who I think his numbers are, can be a little bit deceiving, but he's coming off a game where he had 3 catches for 62 yards. And you look at the first drive of the game, they threw a post route right over the top to Noah Rogers. If I'm NC State and I've watched Christian Gray play, I say, yeah, he played really well against Boise, but he's been better this year when he's been in the boundary, and he won't be in the boundary this game. Where he's been vulnerable this season is when he's playing the field, and when he's defending vertical shots to the field. That has been an area Christian has not been great at. NC State's a team that likes to throw the ball down the field. They throw a lot of vertical shots. We talked about that on Tuesday, Trev, when we were – actually, that was yesterday. When we were bringing down CJ Bailey, we were pointing to the fact that, in 6 games this year, he's already thrown 23 deep balls. He's averaging, so that's almost 4 a game of deep shots. And he's hit 13 of them. He's also thrown 47 passes in that 10 to 19 range. So you're talking about a guy that's had averaging over 10 throws a game that travel beyond 10 yards past the line of scrimmage. They're going to go at Christian Gray. I mean, they'll probably still also take their shots at Leonard Moore, I would imagine, because they're going to go into this game having a lot more confidence in their receivers than most teams have in their receivers in this matchup, because they have really talented players and they're bigger. Wesley Grimes is 6'2", 195. Terrell Anderson 6'2", 192, and then Noah Rogers is 6'2", 197, and they're all long. So they're going to say, hey, look, we're going to run some posts, we're going to run some back shoulders, we're going to run some goes, we're going to run some comebacks, we're going to try to go at number 6. And for Christian's part, he's going to have to play like he did this past week, where he was pretty good. He gave up, 1 catch on an over route. We talked about that. They were kind of in a, mid-sentence communication when the ball was snapped, and Christian just wasn't locked in and didn't play that one well. Rest of the game, he was pretty darn good. And he looked like, first half of last season, Christian Gray, more so. Now that's got to continue. And you could just listen to him talk, Trev. I know you're going to have an article coming out about this, and you brought this to my attention today, and then I went and watched it. And he spoke with a lot more confidence today than he had, a lot more swagger today. And you could tell he's getting more confident in himself, and that's important. But this is a game where he's got to keep that going, because you can't give up a lot of big plays in the pass game. And where I think they're going to try to make them, first and foremost, is going at number 6, which means Christian's going to have to step up and have a big day.
We talked about it a lot at the start of the season, and Notre Dame has the potential to have the best cornerback duo in college football. And I don't think it's really outside of the first game. Leonard Moore's kind of held up his end of the bargain in that conversation. And Christian Gray, it's now time for him to step up and be the player that we all know that he can be. And it starts with these next 2 weeks. I know we're talking NC State specific, but these next 2 weeks are going to be huge for Christian Gray. And if you can get off to a right foot against Terrell Anderson and Noah Rogers, I like that significantly better when he gears up to take on Mekhi Lemon again. And so this is going to be a huge game for Christian. Next matchup, Brian, to talk about, we're going along the defensive line.
Real quick, before we move on to that one. So Vince and I had a chance to break down the game in the Upon Further Review. You weren't on the Upon Further Review this week. What did you think of Christian's game? How did you think he played in this game? How would you compare it to what you've seen from him this year?
He's looked more sure of himself, especially against Boise State. I thought that it wasn't as, you look at how he played against Texas A&M and you look at how he played against Miami. It was very, very passive. He was unsure of himself. He wasn't trusting his technique. He was getting very, very handsy.
Yeah,
very handsy. And one of the plays that stuck out to me that was almost like the turning point was there was a play against Arkansas where he dropped back in cover 3, read the underneath route, and jumped it. And that was very instinctive. From that play, that's more of the Christian Gray that we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
A lot more sure of himself. He understands where he should be. He has a better feel now, much better field awareness. First 2 games, it was, people would run by him and his eyes were still dead in the backfield.
Yep.
And now he's having a better understanding of that under route that he jumped against Arkansas. He goes, he backpedals, keeps his shoulder square to the line of scrimmage so he can keep his eyes on the quarterback, and immediately plants the right foot in the ground, cuts underneath the route. Should have had an interception, but that's kind of the story that we talk about with Christian Gray. Should have had an interception. But
that one, you talking about the Arkansas one? That one was high.
That one would have been.
That was very high. He should have had the Boise one. That's
yes.
the one he should have had. Yeah.
Yes, but that is, to answer your question, Brian, that is more of the Christian Gray that I saw against Boise State, not so much week 1 and week 2. I guess technically week 3.
Yeah. No, I agree. And you guys are just going to – I won't give it away. Y'all are going to have to read the article that Trev's working on because there's a comment in there about I think, where his confidence is coming from. We'll see. We'll see. I'm going to let you get the article out. I won't steal all your thunder. Okay, Trev, we can move on to the next one. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that because that's something you and I haven't really talked about since the postgame show. And I just was curious kind of what you thought after you went back and looked at the film. Because Trev's not on further review, trust me, he's still breaking down the film.
I'm still watching.
Your thoughts, so
don't you worry.
Yeah,
don't you worry.
I know that. I want to make sure they all knew.
Oh yeah, no, you being the chat, eyes were directed at that side of the screen.
Yeah.
No worries, man.
Yeah.
But the next matchup that we're talking about here, Brian, along the defensive line is Boubacar Traore versus Teague Anderson, one of NC State's tackles. And this one is going to be, again, Notre Dame's defense is starting to generate some steam.
Mm-hmm.
Boubacar Traore is one of those players kind of leading that charge of being one of the more impactful edge rushers that they have. This is going to be a huge matchup for Traore as well, one that he has to win.
So I went with this one because you and I had to go back and break the game down because I remember seeing Boubacar on both sides of the line. And Notre Dame this year is going left and right. And so I was like, did they go back to field boundary? And what we found is they didn't. They would have Boubacar on the right side on the first series of the game. And then after that, whenever he was on the right side of the defense, it was in the nickel package. But when they were in their base defense, he was almost always to the left again. When that puts him up against Teague Anderson, the right tackle for NC State. And if you look at on the season, NC State's actually a pretty decent pass blocking team, Trev, on the year. They're not like elite, but they've been solid. But the one guy that's given up the most pressures is Teague Anderson at right tackle. And so if he's at right tackle, that means he's going against Notre Dame's left end, which is Boubacar Traore. That's a little interesting to me. I'm still trying to figure out why they didn't put Boubacar to the right side. And if you go back and look at a lot of his past success, I think a lot of it has come on the left side, but I could be wrong on that, or on the right side. And it also puts him on the blind side of the quarterbacks. But hey, it's a different conversation for a different day. Teague Anderson has given up twice as many pressures as anybody on their their line, according to Pro Football Focus. They've only given up 49 pressures in 6 games. That's be a little over 8 a game, right? I mean, that's 6. Yeah. So 6 times 8 is 48. So yeah, a little over 8 a game. He's got 14 of those 49. The next 2 highest guys are Anthony Carter and Jalen Grant. And they are at 7 each. And so you could talk about, and those are inside guys. So that's their center and their left guard. And then their left tackle, I don't know how to pronounce it. Jacarius Peak is only given up 4 pressures all year. He's been pretty good for them so far. So their left tackle's been good. He's only allowed 4 pressures all season. He's got a pretty high PFF pass block grade too. Teague Anderson has given up 14. And of those 14, 6 of them have been hits on the quarterback. So, and they've only allowed 11 sacks plus hits on the quarterback all year. Over half of those have been given up by Teague Anderson. He's going against Notre Dame's best pass rusher. I mean, this is a game that Boubacar has to feast a little bit. This is the kind of game where if he's really getting into that flow, and I think Boubacar's just kind of gotten better and better each week. I mean, I thought he was my defensive player of the game against, was it Purdue? I think against Purdue. Thought he played solid football against Arkansas. He was good this past week against Boise State. He was very good. And the thing that was encouraging about that is he was excellent against the run. And so that's the other part of it too, is like you've got to be every bit as good handling the run game this week as you did last week. Because the one thing about Teague Anderson is he's not very athletic, but he's 6'5", 322. And he can move you a little bit. And so Boubacar is going to have to be really stout in the run game. But this is a game where I really want to see him come out and just be dominant in the pass game. And if he can do that, then I think they got a shot. Because if you look at PFF, and again, I don't always like PFF grades, but I think in this case it's accurate. Teague Anderson also has their highest run blocking grade of their offensive line. And I think that tracks. So it puts Boubacar in a very interesting situation where the part of your game that is not considered your strength is his strength, but the part of your game that is your strength is not his strength. And how can Boubacar play in those two situations is going to be I think going to have a big impact in this game. This could be a game where Boubacar goes off, or you're like, okay, he still has some work to do. I think it's going to be a fascinating matchup.
Also, I'm going to be very curious to watch what Al Washington and Chris Ash do with the D-end rotation. Knowing that Teague Anderson's strength is as a run blocker, I wonder how much of Josh Burnham we're going to see on Saturday afternoon as well, depending on the matchup. Now, obviously, we're probably not going to see Josh Burnham against Teague Anderson too much on 3rd and 7, but second and 5, we'll see. I think that could be really interesting, but I agree.
And they've had Jordan Patelho as the guy off the bench behind Boubacar. So you can also put Jordan Patelho into this conversation as well, because he's going to get his own pass rush matchups against Teague Anderson. So you could really go with both of those guys. And look, we didn't talk about it, and it's not a matchup that is a focal point, but I am very curious how Notre Dame's right ends have not been great pass rushers this year. And they're going up against a tackle in the Peak kid that's been pretty good against the pass rush so far this year. So can they do anything to, maybe disrupt that blind side? That'd be a nice, break from what we've seen so far. But the Boubacar, Jordan Patelho side is going to be one that I'm going to definitely be keeping my eye on in this game.
The last matchup that we're going to talk about here for the defense, Brian, is Tay Johnson and whoever lines up at will linebacker versus tight end Justin Jolly. And again, we talked about it yesterday, but Justin Jolly is somebody that you've been extremely high on since really the preseason, all throughout the summer. And this is going to be a very interesting matchup for Tay Johnson and whichever will linebacker lines up across from him in pass coverage. Definitely one to watch.
Yeah, it is big time, Trev. It's a matchup that Justin Jolly's a dude. I mean, we've talked about this. Justin Jolly's a dude. He was on our all-opponent team. I think he was both of our first-team guy, or I believe, coming into the season. I know we both had Matt Lauder and Justin Jolly as 1 and 2. I just can't remember if we both had them both 1 and both 2. But he's a dude. That's the moral of the story. Last season, Justin Jolly was their leading pass catcher with yards at 661. He was number 2 in catches behind Casey Concepcion. He had 43 catches and 15.4 yards per catch. That's an impressive number. In 2023, he had 56 catches for 578 yards. And then as a freshman in 2022, he had 18 catches for 250 yards. He's a highly productive player. So far this season, Trev, he hasn't really gone off. He's caught a lot of balls. He's caught 28 passes, so he's on pace for 56 catches. That's a lot more than he had last year, but he's not had the impact down the field that we've seen this year. He has caught 5, 4, 4, 5, 6, and 4 passes in their 6 games, so he's going to catch the ball. But his yards total is 27, 41, 22, 63, 60, and 43. He's only been above 10.8 yards per carry once all season. That was against Duke. He had 5 for 63. You've got to make sure this is not the game he goes off. So there's 2 aspects of this. Number 1 is third down is going to be a down where CJ Bailey likes to look at him a lot on third down. And so you're going to have to make sure that you have a plan in place to hey, are you going to be able to get on him on first down? So of his 28 catches, 15 of them have gone for first downs this season. And so he's a guy that is going to be a focal point of this offense. And it's at times it's going to be the linebackers matched up against him on crossers, overs, seams, things like that. And other times you'll see Tay Johnson matched up on him, when he's working over the field. They're going to have to make sure that they have a plan for him on third down, but then also that you've got to make sure this isn't the game where he's a big play weapon. And if they watched Notre Dame play last week, they'll say, hey, there was some tight end screen stuff there for Boise State that Notre Dame didn't do a good job of reading. I could see them trying to do some things because he's not a big kid. He's more like a Ty Washington body type than he is an Eli Raridan body type. He's 6'3", 240-ish and athletic. So I could see them doing some things to get him the football in other ways that are going to put those guys in binds. And so those linebackers are going to have to do a good job of having a plan for him and defending him and not having this be the game where he goes off and keeping him in check.
Agreed. Tay Johnson's going to have to make sure that Justin Jolly doesn't beat them down the field vertically like he's failed to do. Not Tay Johnson's failed to do, but like Justin Jolly hasn't really had that impact this season up the seam like he did last year. And then linebackers underneath are going to have to make sure that they do everything that they can to reroute him, get hands on them and underneath routes, because that's one of the areas that still needs a lot of improvement. Underneath routes, not rerouting and not getting hands on people. And Justin Jolly will feast on you if you don't.
Oh, yeah. If you're giving clean releases to Terrell Anderson and Noah Rogers and Justin Jolly, you are absolutely correct. They did such a better job of that last week, Trevor. That was so, again, this is why you need to be a premium member. If you look at the breakdown that we did on the site, and one of the things I heard, Trevor, I don't know if you heard this from people that you talked to as well, they didn't really do anything different defensively. They're just more comfortable in the system now. They know how to do the things better now. And I'm like, that's a small part of it. They were very different in this game. Very different and much more aggressive, much more jumping on receivers at 2-3 yards down the field as opposed to letting them get 8, 9, 10 yards down the field and not get touched. Much more aggressive jumping routes. And so it's a much more aggressive game plan. And there's some things that were said by multiple players in the press conference yesterday that backs up what we saw on film, that it wasn't the same thing. And to your point is my fear, and again, this is just not knowing Chris Ash very well, but the evidence we saw the games prior to Boise State is my fear is he's going to look at these talented receivers and say, okay, we don't want to throw it over our heads. So we're going to play soft again. We're going to play, soft 2, soft 4, soft 3, like we saw the first 4 games. And if that happens, then these receivers and Justin Jolly are going to go off. If they play a game that's more geared towards like last week. Now, again, you can't just replicate the same game plan because they're a very different offense from Boise State. But from a philosophical standpoint of aggressiveness, attack, those type of things, then you'll have more success because you're going to force CJ Bailey to hold on to the ball longer, which is going to give you a chance to make some plays. There's one other matchup, Trev, I just want to mention that we didn't talk a lot about, but I don't expect to see, obviously, Devontae Smith this week. He's out for this. He's going to be out for this game. Dallas Golden against Keenan Jackson is one that I'm also very interested in. Keenan Jackson's a bigger kid. He's 6'3", 2. What's ironic is their biggest receivers, their slot. Keenan Jackson is 6'3", 202. Matched up against Dallas Golden. Dallas has been very good so far this year when they've put him in the game. But this is going to be a little bit of a different type of test for him. And NC State likes to run some post-snap switch type of stuff, and that's going to put Dallas in some binds. They're going to watch what Boise did to Notre Dame last week with the motions and the slides and using movement to their, to get him running across. Because if you notice what Notre Dame is doing, they get him to trail. And Dallas has got to learn how to better handle that, because he would start working inside like, oh, shoot, the linebacker's there. And then they have to kind of bump around him. And that got him out of position, where Jordan Clark was really good at that. He knew how to kind of travel with the slot to put himself in a position where he was squared up and ready to defend. That's part of the learning process for Dallas, because he's never done that before until he got to Notre Dame. But I could also see NC State saying, hey, look, early in the game, we see that freshman nickel out there. We're going to try to go at him a little bit. And you could also see that part of how they use Justin Jolly. I mean, I would do that. I mean, we talked about Tay Johnson and the Will linebackers, but there's going to be times when he's going to be a part of a trips look where Drake Bowen's got to be on him. But I could see them saying, hey, look, let's try to get Justin Jolly out in the slot and put that bigger body against the nickel, the freshman nickel, who's talented but still a freshman. And then how can they use, Keenan Jackson to impact that as well, to maybe take some of the pressure off of the outside guys. That's something that I've got my eye on in this matchup as well. We didn't focus on it as a, as one of the matchups, but I think that's one that I'm very intrigued by as well. Very intrigued by.
Definitely one to keep your eye on for sure. And I agree wholeheartedly. Well, folks, that's going to do it for part one of today's show. Don't go anywhere. We are getting ready to talk keys to victory. But before we get there, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Also, make sure you're subscribed to the CFB Nation channel. Tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Vince and I are going live for the next edition of the Spread Option. And like we alluded to earlier today, this is a crazy slate of college football. You're not going to want to miss tomorrow night's show. Also, make sure you have that notification bell hit so you know whenever we go live. And then whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, we greatly appreciate a 5-star review. We are also going to be doing a mailbag at the end of today's show. So make sure that you're getting your questions, your comments in as this show goes on, because after Keys to Victory, we're going to try to do a little mailbag at the end. But in order to do that, we got to have some questions and comments to talk about. So make sure you get those thrown in.
If y'all don't want a mailbag, it's all good. We'll bounce after the Keys to Victory. We get it. Y'all got stuff to do too. I feel you. Understandable.
But folks, as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, in part two of today's show here in the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by FanDuel, we're talking keys to victory, kind of part of our new format that we're doing. I know typically we do that on Thursday, but today we're doing it on Wednesday. We're going to be doing that moving forward. I'm excited for this new format. But keys
especially
to victory.
Since it was your idea.
What? What? Oh, come on! It was a good idea. It was a nameless good idea.
No, it wasn't.
And it was an
I like
Irish
to give credit where
breakdown.
credit is due. It was a good idea by Trevor. It's a good idea by Trevor.
Well, it is a good idea, and I'm glad that Brian signed off on it. We are now doing Keys to Victory on Wednesday, and I'm excited to talk about it. It's going to flow really well, and it's going to lead from the conversation that we just had about these matchups that matter. To the surprise of nobody, we're going to start to talk about the offensive side first. And we're going to talk about keys to victory on offense. And we're going to start with starting fast. But again, like it does every week, it has a little bit of a different meaning. Notre Dame's offense is coming off of a performance that was decent.
Yeah.
But starting fast is going to be big in this game. Really big.
Well, it ties into something that you and I talked about yesterday. Sort of the what to prove, what's at stake. You want to make sure that what we saw last week doesn't become a trend. People say, well, they played well, but. Well, if they have to put a but in there, then they didn't play well. Just because they moved the ball at times doesn't mean they played well. If you scored 28 points and had 389 yards, but if you played well, you'd have had 41 points and 445 yards or something like that. No, you didn't play well. They made plays, but they didn't play well. There was mistakes up front, silly penalties, not even the bad play call, bad points that the officiating did. You had your own mistakes, you had your own holds and false starts and things like that. Missing open receivers not kind of jogging out of breaks and not accelerating and things like that. There was plenty of things that Notre Dame didn't do well. You've got to make sure this game is more like Purdue and Arkansas. And first and foremost, and we'll talk about some of the other things here in a second, Trevor, but the first and the foremost, the primary reason that needs to happen is this offense needs to make sure they don't get into a rut. Because sometimes a struggle like that can manifest into sort of like a slump, and as opposed to just being a bad game. And you need to make sure that this was just a bad, like an off game, not a slump where you start to play poorly for 2, 3, 4 games in a row. Remember Ohio State went through that last year. There was that kind of period in October, November, where their offense just seemed out of sync. Will Howard was missing throws that he had kind of made all year, and their offense just wasn't really kind of getting at the same kind of rhythm that we saw. They scored 21 points against Nebraska. They scored 20 points against Penn State. Their 45 points against Purdue was a very sloppy game. You only had 433 yards against Purdue. Like, it's going to kind of sound funny, but you having only 433 yards against Purdue is an off game for your offense. When you look at what Purdue was doing, everybody else, Notre Dame had 578, Wisconsin had 589, Illinois had 556, Penn State went for 539, Indiana went for 582. Everybody else was over 7-8 yards per play, and Ohio State was at 6.6. So, like, they just were in that kind of that funk, Trev, where they just weren't themselves. They scored 31 points, only had 420 yards against Northwestern. They only had 316 yards of offense against Indiana. They only had 252 yards against Michigan. Like, sort of like that Nebraska game coming out of the loss to Oregon, like, their offense didn't recover till the Tennessee game. Like, truly recover till the Tennessee game. And that was with Will Howard and Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins and Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka. So just because it was a bad game doesn't mean that it's not going to bleed into other games and become a bit of a pattern that you got to figure out how to get out of. That's why I think a fast start in this game is important, because, like, put that game behind us. Because here's my fear, Trevor, is if CJ comes out early and he misses some throws. We saw it with Riley last year too. When Riley had some missed throws early, it started getting his head. And he starts, like, I think the Miami of Ohio game is a perfect example. Like, he threw one of the ugliest passes I've ever seen on a little, just a little screen play to Cooper Flanagan. And it's the play that Cooper got hurt on the first time. And you could see it was so in his head. He was like trying to put the ball out there to make sure that he could get it out there. And of course he sails it. And you're like, it can get in your head. I mean, professional athletes will get the yips. And I'm not saying that's going to happen to CJ. But that's why a fast start's important. And where it comes from is when you miss a couple throws, you're like, dude, I don't miss that throw. And then you've missed it again. You're like, what's going on with me? You start pressing. You could see that against Boise. CJ was pressing on some of those throws where he was trying to make a perfect throw. Instead of, dude, just relax. Just rip it, man. You've been doing this your whole life. You throw one of the best balls in college football. Just relax and let her rip. And that's why I think a fast start could kind of settle him down. Like, dude, that game's behind us. It's no big deal. He's a younger player, so he doesn't have as much experience kind of coming out of those games. It's really his first game as a passer that you're just like, he wasn't really on. He was pretty good throwing the ball against Miami. His decision-making wasn't great, but when he threw it, it was a thing of beauty. This was his first kind of off game. How does he kind of come out of that? And I think a fast start puts that in the rear view and lets CJ know, dude, you're fine. And then lets the rest of the offense know, CJ's fine. Let's go out and rip this team up. So I think that's the number one priority to a fast start. And then there's obviously the other aspects of how it impacts the defense and NC State and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's something that is good because it'll help the offense say, hey, this isn't going to become a trend. We're shaking that off. We're coming out here against NC State, and we're going to bury them.
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, last game, it was almost I talked about it last night on IB Nation Sports Beat, but the parody is insane. And I know you guys talked about it a little bit upon further review. It's just about how, last year, game 5, the offense had to show the defense, hey, you guys don't have to hold every opponent to 10 points for us to walk away with a win. Well, in game 5 of 2025, the defense showed the offense, hey, you don't have to score 50 points every week for us to be in it and for us to win convincingly. A fast start is going to put the minds at ease of both the offense and the defense. Yes, agree completely that it's going to get CJ in the rhythm. It's what you need. Boise State was the first game in 4 games that they didn't score on the opening possession?
Yeah, the last time was what? Texas A&M, right?
Yeah. So it's one of those where it's like when your offense starts to cook, this offense is very rhythm-based. Now, they showed positive of not starting fast against Boise State is they showed that they're able to overcome some things. They're able to overcome some penalties and just a weird flow of the game. But you don't want to put yourself in that position where you're going to have to continually prove that every single week. And so a fast start's going to be absolutely imperative. And if this group is able to start fast, Brian, it's a really good segue. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll say the other thing too is I don't know that this is an offense that you want to have your defense have to hold them to under 20 points. This isn't Boise's offense. This is a much different type of offense. And this is the type of offense where if your defense does not make the changes permanent that we saw last week, if you score 7 points in the first 1.5 quarters, you could find yourself down 24-7 as opposed to being down 7-6. And so I think there's also that element to it as well, is you don't want to fall behind early. If the defense struggles early with NC State, you need to be able to match them with scores until the defense can figure it out. Because the one thing we have seen from this defense is for the most part, they've been better in the second half than they are the first half. And I think that was also true last week. So you want to make sure that you're still you either have a small lead or you're only a field goal behind when you go into the second half and the defense is able to make some adjustments. So I think there's that aspect of it too. But if your defense is playing well and you can come out and start fast, to your point, Trevor, is now you let the defense know, like, hey guys, we're fine. We're good. Last week was an anomaly. If you guys keep doing what you're doing, we won't lose another game. And, like ever, if we can both play to the best of our ability. And I think that's important too. And the crowd and all that. But I really think this NC State team is going to come into this game with a lot of false confidence. The problem with false confidence is if you don't let them know right away that, guys, you aren't us, that false confidence becomes real confidence. But the flip side is if you come out and punch them in the mouth right away, that false confidence becomes doubt. And that's how you can bury a team like this. I'm not saying they're going to, but I'm saying that's why a fast start is very important.
100%. False confidence can go one of two ways. It can either be Clemson 2023 or Arkansas 2025. And that's what's at stake at this game, for sure. But a fast start.
That's a great point. That's a great point, Trevor, because that's exactly what they did to Clemson in 2023 is they let a reeling team get confidence early, and all of a sudden, confidence-wise, they started looking like old Clemson.
Yep.
And you couldn't do anything about it. But if you'd have jumped on them earlier, Clemson was going to quit, and that game was going to either be what it was or it was going to be a blowout for Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. And it all was about the start. And could you start fast? Yep, that's a great point. I didn't even think about that. That's a great point.
It's one of those that you got to be able to nix it real quick. And if you're able to start fast, it leads into our key to victory number 2 for this offense. So you have to make NC State think and communicate. We've talked really the last couple of days about how this is just an undisciplined defense. And one thing that I love that Notre Dame did against Boise State early is they played with a lot of tempo. I mean, you and I were up in the press box and we looked at each other and said, they're going fast.
The third game in a row they've done that. They did that against Arkansas early in the game, and they did that a little bit against Purdue. I mean, you couldn't tell in the first series if they were doing that because it was one freaking play. It's like you come off the bench. I don't know what kind of tempo you sprint to the line and go, but they throw a 66-yard bomb on the first play. But there were times against Purdue where they would kind of start pushing the tempo a little bit. They did that against Arkansas, and I think there's a lot of reasons for this, Trevor. And number one is that this is a bigger D line. This is kind of a D line that's like Arkansas, that's like Purdue, in that they kind of start 3 big guys as opposed to like 2 true tackles and an end. They're more, they're more geared towards 3 bigger guys as opposed to there's times I've seen where they'll have 3 guys in the field that are 260 plus. They'll kind of bump to an odd front. Sloan will kind of bump outside, or he's more like kind of like a Viper type of player, and he'll drop into coverage. So they're going to play more big boy football than trying to be like really fast, twitchy edge rushers. They're going to put bigger guys in the field. We talked about, Brandon Cleveland is 6'4", 315. You got Chaz Wallace is 308. They'll play Josiah Victor, who's 312. Isaiah Shirley's a younger kid with a smaller body type. And so either one of those two things, Travali Price is only 285. You either have a smaller guy that you want to beat up or a bigger guy that you want to make run. Either way, pushing the tempo impacts both of those. So I want to get Brandon Cleveland gassed. I want to get him having to, defend 5 plays in, 2 minutes of real life time. You know what I mean? Like, I want to push the tempo. But the other part of that too, Trev, is you talked about the lack of discipline. And what we've seen from this NC State team is, like you and I were talking earlier today, so it's wild because you'll watch 4 or 5 plays in a row and you're like, dude, that's good defense right there. And then the next play, they'll just not cover someone. Or the next play, we were laughing about this run they had, I think it was against Virginia, where they just slanted the D line to the boundary and they just took everybody else to the field, and the running back just cuts back and there's like nobody backside, and he rips off a big run. You're like, I have no clue what they were doing. They don't have a clue what they were doing. And so the more you move, the more you go with tempo, and then the more you move pre-snap, motion shifts, overload alignments. Like Notre Dame has done like a trio overload. So they'll put 3 receivers to the right, and instead of having the tight end backside, they'll bring the tight end over. There's things you'll do where they'll get misaligned. You're going to snap the ball and they're still communicating. They're not sure who to defend. And the more aggressive you get with NC State, I was about to say Boise, with NC State, the more likely they are to make a mistake, which with this offense for Notre Dame, whether it's Love, Price, Greathouse, Pauling, Fields, Faison, KK Smith, Logan Saldate, Micah Gilbert, Eli Raridan, you can name anybody. They've got home run hitters all over the field to where if they make a mistake, it's 6. And so you want to put them in those things. You want to get them on their heels. You want to get them communicating and shit. I mean, they look a lot like Notre Dame earlier in the season on defense, where a simple fast motion has 11 dudes doing something different. And you're communicating in the offense, the offense is snapping the ball, and you don't know what to do. It's very similar. And so that's why I look at this, Trev, and I'm like, I think that if you can come out of this game and if you can get them moving around and communicating and talking, because look, you just do not want to let them just line up and get their calls and their checks in and have a beat on what you're doing. You want them running all over the place. You want them moving, thinking, talking. If you do that, you're going to gash them with big plays. So it's not so much about being aggressive. That's just this team is aggressive. I mean, I don't even really have that mindset now. I had the concerns going into Purdue and in Arkansas. You and I both expressed those concerns about, is Marcus Freeman going to kind of pull the reins back? And no, he didn't at all. When they jumped out to a 21-7 lead, it wasn't like, okay, guys, now ground and pound and run no, it was like they went right after him again. They're up 28-7. They run a freaking reverse. It's very obvious that Marcus Freeman has basically said, Denbrock, go do what you do. Now, he'll still have his say and do things, and that's not like he doesn't have any authority over the offense. He's the head football coach. He can say whatever he wants. But after what we saw against the last 3 opponents, I'm kind of over is Marcus Freeman going to do that thing? And if he does it, then we can address it, but I'm not worried about it anymore. So the aggressiveness is not an issue. It's more so, but are you going to come out and get them on their heels with how you go about your business, with your pace and with your movement? And if they do that, then the aggressiveness is going to result in a lot of big plays, a lot of yards, and a lot of points.
Next key to victory, Brian, that we're going to talk about for the offense is mixing up the run game and then having to stick to it. Mike Denbrock this season has done a pretty good job of mixing up the run game. That was one thing that we highlighted with him against Purdue, against Arkansas. And so this is another game where they're facing a different type of defensive front, and they're going to have to be creative with how they run the football.
Trev, when I look at this, so the one game that he came out of the NC State game or the A&M game thinking dude, there was just not a lot of creativity in the run game. They kept running mid-zone, snap after snap after snap. There just wasn't a lot of creativity. Since then, to your point, they've been very good in that regard. And it's needed. This is a lot like the Arkansas game. You know, a lot of the things that you and I have to say about this NC State defense are very similar to what we were talking about Arkansas, right? Big D tackles that you want to get going, vulnerable on the secondary, athletic guys, but vulnerable on the secondary, you know, linebackers that you can get in bad spots. You want to move it's very similar to that. And one thing that Notre Dame did a great job of against Arkansas is they really mixed up how they attacked Arkansas with their run game. It wasn't just, you couldn't just line up and say, play the mid zone all game, you know? So when they step this way, you got to go that way. They did a great job of doing different things to give them problems. I mean, they ran mid zone 11 times against Arkansas. They ran their duo inside zone 8 times. They ran counter 3 times. They ran an outside zone for a big play. They ran 2 toss cracks. They ran like their kind of their double pull scheme. And it's like they really had Arkansas on their heels, because like what was happening was when they see blocking down, you're thinking, okay, it's so like if you see the line blocking down and Jeremiah Love step this way, it looks like mid zone, but all of a sudden you're running duo, and so you cut that sucker back as opposed to the stretch, or you know you see gap down and so you're thinking, oh, they're going that way because it's mid zone, and then all of a sudden the guard and the tackle are pulling around and kicking out. I mean, you know, you're running a quick outside play. I would love to see like a jet action in this game just to mess with them a little bit. And like this is the game. This is the game. We're talking about yesterday. Somebody asked about this in the mailbag. This is the game that I want to see 21 personnel where Jeremiah Love's going in a jet motion. You hand it off to him the first time, and then the next time you do that, you're flashing that, you know, and then running the ball right inside to Jadarian Price. I think that's the kind of thing you could just really give NC State some major problems with. Or you could do it the other way around. You know, just have Jeremiah flash fake a couple times, just hand the ball off to Jadarian. And then they're like, oh, they're not going to give him the ball. And then you throw a bubble screen to him or something like that. Or you motion him out and you throw a little now screen to him. Or you hand it off to him the 3rd or 4th time he does it. And then they're not thinking about it. However you do it, you could really get them on their heels. And this is another way of doing that. So the motions and the shifts kind of get them on their heels and then go at them, but mix up how you go at them. You know, mid-zone out, like last week, even the mid-zone outside zone was a bit of a unique mix-up, and they ended up rushing for, what did my number say, Trev? So this is, again, one of those things that you want to be a premium board member because you get this full data breakdown, but they ran outside zone 7 times for 126 yards against Boise State. They'd only run outside zone, I think, 8 times a whole year coming into that game. And they only ran it once against Arkansas. And that was on the 3rd and 7 on the first drive of the game. And they ran that after they had done something on the previous 3rd and 7 that they didn't get, and they had the offsetting penalties. So I think those are things that if you can have a nice mixed up run game, who's getting the ball, the action, the tempo, then you're going to be able to find some success. Because I think running the ball is very important in this game. And NC State's the kind of defense where they will kind of shut you down 50. If you watch the UVA game and you're at first you're like, dude, I don't know if UVA is going to be able to run the ball on them. It's like 2 yards here, 1 yard minus here. Then all of a sudden, boom, 39-yard touchdown run. Boom, 66-yard touchdown run. Boom, 40-yard gain, because they're very inconsistent. And so you may not come out right away and just be gashing them. It may be like the Arkansas game, because we pointed this out too, Trev. I think 4 of their first 5 carries against Arkansas were minuses from an efficiency standpoint, because Arkansas was committing so, but they stuck with it. They started mixing it up, and next thing you know, it's gashing them here, gashing them there, and then this, from the kind of late first into the second quarter, you were just ripping them apart with the run game, and then that opens up the pass game and some of those things. So I think that a balanced rushing attack is something that could create some major problems for NC State. But if you just line up and run mid-zone at them all day, you're playing right into their hands, because you're just going to be running right at the Brandon Cleveland all game long. And I don't know that that's necessarily the best strategy.
The one thing I will say is FanDuel absolutely thinks that Notre Dame is going to have some success running the football, because you go and you look at what some of these numbers are. Like I said, the player props came out today. Jeremiah Love's over-under set at 99.5, and Jadarian Price's over-under set at 73.5. Unfortunately, Vegas caught up pretty quick on really setting back the odds or really raising the odds for Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price anytime touchdown. For Jeremiah Love to get in the end zone, it's minus 600. And then for Jadarian Price to get in the end zone, it's minus 250. So basically all that means is if you bet $10 on Jeremiah Love to score a touchdown, you'll win $1.67. So he's one of those that's just starting to become, death taxes. Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price find the end zone.
So. I mean, in fairness, he's only been kept out of the end zone once all year, or once in his last 2 years when in a game where he wasn't injured.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's Miami. This year is really the only in the last 2 years, the only game where a non-injured Jeremiah Love was kept out of the end zone was Miami this year. And he would have scored if CJ would have handed him that mid-zone play instead of pulling and throwing it outside. He would have had one in that game too. So, but yeah, death taxes and Jeremiah Love scoring a touchdown. Yeah.
I'll have to find a way to put that on a t-shirt or something. But yeah, man, it's the odds aren't in your favor. Like I said, I guess if you have $10,000 sitting around and you want to put it on a Jeremiah Love anytime touchdown, then you might be worth your while. Yeah. But if you're like me, you don't really need that $1.67 all that bad. But yes, I do think Notre Dame is going to have a lot of success on the ground if, to your point, they're able to mix up their run game.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing Notre Dame's offense is going to have to do, fourth key to victory for us, Brian, is to be able to hit the deep shots. Mm-hmm. NC State secondary, we talked about this yesterday. NC State's defense is weird, and they have talent specifically in the front seven of their defense. But you start to talk about the back end of this defense, and that's where they've struggled a lot. This is also going to be a good kind of litmus test for CJ Carr to see if, hey, have you put that Boise State game behind you? CJ Carr has done he's done a really good job of taking deep shots and hitting deep shots throughout the season, but against Boise State, he went 1 of 7 on passes 20 yards or longer down the field. Notre Dame's going to have to be able to take some shots and hit them over the top against NC State.
Yeah, and look, their corners are not bad. Their corners are solid players. They have some safety issues, I think, in coverage, and they have some linebacker issues, but their corners are decent players. Devin Marshall this season has given up, look at PFF, he's given up 14 catches on 26 targets, 152 yards. He hasn't allowed more than 45 yards in a game. That was against Duke. He can be beat. I'm not saying he can't, but he's a solid player. Last season at NC State, Devin Marshall allowed 52% completion rate, only gave up 297 yards all season. And so, he's a solid player, gave up 3 touchdowns, but had 2 picks and 8 breakups, according to Pro Football Focus. He hasn't had any hasn't allowed a single touchdown all year. Matter of fact, their corners have not allowed a touchdown all season in the past game. They've only allowed 8 touchdowns in 6 games throwing the football. And then Jamel Johnson, who is, again, solid player. He's transferred in from Temple. This is his 3rd school, I believe. He's been targeted 23 times and given up 12 catches for 146 yards. He has not had given up a touchdown either. Now, neither of them had an interception yet. But, he's a guy that I think is a little bit more vulnerable. And especially early in the year, he got up 71 yards receiving against East Carolina and then 51 against Virginia. But in the 4 games since, he's allowed 0 catches on 1 target, 1 catch on 1 target for 12 yards, 0 catches on 5 targets against Virginia Tech. And then he also only gave up 1 catch on 3 targets against Campbell. Now, here's where I think Notre Dame should kind of look to feast a little bit is they have another corner that plays a little bit. And he's been solid so far this year, but Brian Nelson will also rotate in a corner. He's number 7. When he's in the game, I would definitely look to take shots on them. But look, they're good players. They're good players. Having said that, they're not as good as the Notre Dame receivers. And when you get in one-on-ones, you've got to throw accurate balls, and then the Notre Dame receivers are going to have to do a better job of making plays. I think this is a game we haven't seen the go ball be as effective the last 2 weeks. They didn't really throw it last week. They threw 1 that I can think of, and that was drew a PI. Did they throw any other goes last week? I don't think they did. They threw post slot fades and things like that, but they, obviously, and against Arkansas, it was kind of hit or miss. They hit some, missed some. That's been a throw that CJ's nailed. I would love to see that this week. I think to the field, especially, there's times when they'll go press to the field with a single high safety. And that's a play where either a go route to your Z or a slot fade to your slot needs to be a go-to there when you get that look, even if you're checking into it. I think that's a great opportunity there. Eli Raridan's going to have some opportunities and matchups to throw the ball down the field. You got to call it, and CJ's got it. You've got to protect it, and CJ's got to hit it, because there are, to your point, Trev, there will be some big time downfield opportunities for the pass game this week, and you're going to have to hit those shots. Because if CJ if what we see from CJ Carr is more like the last 2 weeks as opposed to the first 3 games, then teams are going to say, okay, he's not hitting those shots as much. We're going to put more resources in the box to stop the run. But if he can come out and hit a couple of those shots early in the game, like I think he can, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, we can't load the box. We have to play him more straight up. And that plays right in Notre Dame hands. So, and it could be backs out of the backfield, whatever the case may be, but there's going to be some shots to hit the ball down the field. You can't force it, because there's other times they'll play like this weird, like diamond, cover 3-ish type of thing. It's like, it's almost like a Tampa 2 where the guy's already back there. It doesn't even look like, it looks more like 2 than it does 3. And when they're doing that, okay, there's not going to be shots, but that's where you can run at them and where you can hit screens on them. And I mean, they mix up a lot of different stuff, and I think they do too much coverage-wise, honestly. I think they should play more basic and this is actually a pretty athletic defense in certain spots. Sean Brown's very athletic. I think Ronnie Rowe's a pretty darn good athlete. The corners are good athletes, and they started a nickel against Campbell that I think is a better player than what they had been starting before. So they had Assad Brown was starting a nickel, and they started a kid against Campbell, Javon Bailey, as I think that's how his name is pronounced, B-A-L-Y. And I'm just like, he's a lot more fluid. He's a lot twitchier. He was really more sticky in coverage. That was Campbell. But, but he's a good athlete, but they do so much that their guys are thinking so much. They can't just go run. That's what I think they should do. But even then they're going to have problems with the one-on-one matchups against Notre Dame. So when you can do things to get into those one-on-ones, and then you got to throw it, protect it, and call it, protect it, and throw it and catch it. And if they do that, then I think NC State's going to be in big trouble.
Final key to victory on offense, Brian, and I love this key to victory. It's impact in the screen game. And you've been pretty spot on the last couple of games when you've mentioned Notre Dame's ability to hit some big plays in the screen game. You called it against Arkansas. I do remember that. You 100% called it then. So I love this key to victory. Notre Dame is going to have some opportunities in the screen game. Walk us through why this is the 5th key to victory for this offense.
Well, it goes back to the big play thing, and it goes back to going at what I think NC State's going to do to try to stop Notre Dame. I don't think NC State's just going to sit back and say, bring it on. I think they're going to know, they're going to watch Boise, and they're going to say, yeah, Notre Dame hit some big plays, but they created more mistakes from Notre Dame. They created more misses by heating up the pressure. And they will bring safety fires, they will bring nickel fires, they'll bring linebacker blitzes, they'll slant, they'll stunt. They do a lot of things up front. Again, I think sometimes too much. And what can happen is if you have a well-designed screen and a well-executed screen, you can hurt them for big plays. Tight end screens or something that I definitely could see being a big part of the game. I think there's times Virginia would just, they did it more out of an RPO, but they would see against the softer coverage, they just pull it and throw the now screen, just throw it out. Now screen just means it's like, now just go. Slip screens, maybe. I don't know that slip screens are going to be as effective out of the backfield, because I would imagine they're going to key on Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price a little bit more. And it may be more effective with Jadarian than it would be with Jeremiah if they're going to play it. But then you have the bootleg throwback screen that you had against Arkansas. I could see a play like that opening up, because I called that exact screen. But the tight end screen could be one that we see this game. The tunnel screen could be one, because if you catch them, if they're not blitzing, the tunnel screen won't really go anywhere. That's fine. It's no different than running an inside zone or a mid zone to get stuff for 2 yards. But if you catch them in a blitz, it's going to go. And that's the thing I like about it is, even like an angle screen out of the backfield, a tunnel screen from the boundary. I mean, if you can catch them in a blitz, if your preparation tells you that they're a heavy blitz team in this situation, or whether it's against a formation, whether it's against a look, or whether it's a down and distance, then hey, you can catch them in one of those screens and it can go. And so I think that's a big part of it too, because what that does, Trev, is it now says, hey, you better back off or we're going to hurt you. And a lot of times Mike Denbrock has waited to really go to a screen game till deeper into the game. Like I think the throwback screen against Jeremiah Love was their fifth touchdown of the game. The touchdown to Jeremiah Love that was a similar play to what they ran against Louisville last year. It was actually almost the same exact play they ran against Louisville last year for touchdown, but that was fourth quarter. I think these are things where I'd like to see them kind of go to this stuff early. And if you can hit a couple of them, it's going to say to NC State that you blitz at your own peril. And so this also kind of goes with the hit the deep shots. If you're going to come up and put extra hats in the box, and I'm hitting Malachi on one play, Eli down the field on another play, Greathouse on the slot fade, or whatever the case may be, and then I gash you with a couple screens, all of a sudden you're going to say, well, how bad do you really want to blitz us? And then if that forces them to then back off, then that's when the run game takes over.
Definitely opportunities to take advantage of in the screen game. I agree with you completely. Brian, let's talk defensive keys to victory. And this is going to be interesting. Building off of the what's at stake conversation, this Notre Dame defense is strung together two pretty good performances. And we saw some things differently schematically that they did against Boise State, which allowed them to play more fast, aggressive, free, and violent football. Ideally, we see a little bit more of that against NC State. Now, it's not going to mirror what it looked like against Boise State because NC State's base offense is a little different than Boise State's, like we talked about, like you guys talked about upon further review. It wasn't a secret what Boise State wanted to do. They wanted to line up in 12 personnel and run downhill. NC State is going to try to spread you out, but that doesn't mean that you can lack aggressiveness, which is the first key to victory. Notre Dame has to be aggressive in this matchup on Saturday.
You nailed it, Trev. It's not about X's and O's. It's not the same coverages and the same blitzes and the same alignments that you used against Boise State. A lot of what they did, as we showed in the breakdown, was this is geared towards defending a team that wants to use motions and alignments to create extra gaps in the run game. NC State likes to run the football. They are going to build around their run game, but it's in a different way. Their pass game is different. This is a quarterback that I'm not going to say make CJ Bailey beat you because he will, or he can, I should say. It's more so about you have to be the aggressors. You have to attack. One of the flaws, and it makes a lot of sense that they're old friends and coach together and have similar philosophies. One of my big issues with Dave Dorn over the years at NC State is just a lack of aggressiveness outside of the Tony Gibson era. And so they would kind of let the offense dictate to them what's going on. And you can't do that when you have the athletes that Notre Dame has. You have to be the aggressor. You have to be willing to take away the quick game. We talked about it. CJ Bailey's a guy that likes to throw the ball down the field, but he's also he'll pick you apart all game long if you're going to sit back and just let him throw the ball. He's thrown 71 passes this year from 0 to 9 yards, and he's thrown 36 balls behind the line of scrimmage. That's a lot of short throws also because they throw the ball a lot. And you can't just sit back and say, hey, we're gonna just let you have this stuff because they have the type of receivers that will make you pay for that. And I don't want them running the screen to Noah Rogers or Terrell Anderson or Hollywood Smothers when you're playing soft cover 3 because it's going to be about the easiest 7, 8, 9 yard gain that they're going to have all season. So I want to see the aggressiveness still there. I want to see them attack. Let your linebackers play downhill. Let your defensive line be the more athletic unit and attack and penetrate. Let your secondary be aggressive. Don't coach scared of them having talented receivers because they have very talented receivers. To me, this is the litmus test for Chris Ash, even before next week against USC. Because if you're afraid of these receivers, then you're definitely going to be afraid of next week's receivers. And that's the thing is, you don't be, because you have Leonard Moore, you have Christian Gray, you have Tay Johnson, you have Don Schultz, you have Dallas Golden, you have Mark Zachary, you have Jalen Stroman, you have Luke Talich, you have plenty of athletes to run with these guys. But you don't have the athletes to run these guys if you just let CJ Bailey sit back in the pocket all day and not be aggressive. and not attack. So I just want to see similar philosophy. The unique pressures and the unique coverage structures and the unique line games will be all geared towards stopping NC State and not Boise State, but the philosophy has to be there.
Agreed.
That's
absolutely. Big picture, they have to play downhill. They have to play aggressive and fast. They have to play aggressive in the run game and in coverage, because we watched it work in different moments, not just against Boise State. So I agree with you completely. The next one, and this is also a huge, huge key, and if you follow key to victory number one and being aggressive, you should do a pretty good job of limiting NC State's big plays. I said it yesterday. Brian, you also talked about it. NC State is a team that feasts on explosive plays. I mean, it's as simple as going back through and looking at their box score and just looking at, okay, 2-yard gain, 1-yard loss, 3-yard gain, 54-yard gain. 1-yard loss, 2-yard gain, 4-yard gain, 48-yard gain. Right now, if we're just talking explosive plays, they have 25 passes of 20 yards or longer through 6 games and 34 rushes of 10 yards or longer on the season through 6 games. This is an offense that absolutely feasts on explosive plays, and Notre Dame is going to have to do a good job. And we saw them struggle with this earlier in the season, but Notre Dame is going to have to do a good job of limiting big plays from NC State.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Trev, it's just you look at their stats, and Hollywood Smothers long of 59 rushing this year, and Jaden Scott's got a 35-yard gain. CJ Bailey's got a 30-yard gain. Terrell Anderson's longest play is 75 yards. Wesley Grimes, 48. Noah Rogers, 48. Keenan Jackson, 33. Teddy Hoffman, 50. Cody Hardy, 37. That was like a wheel route touchdown. And then Hollywood Smothers has a 21-yard gain out of the backfield. As we pointed out, in 6 games, CJ Bailey's hit 13 shots, completed 13 balls past 20 yards past the line of scrimmage. And this is a team that, as you said, Trev, they're a big play. They're a big play offense. We talked about this the other day, and when we were preparing for this game, NC State right now is 6th in the country with 18 plays of 30 yards or more. They are tied for 5th in the country with 11 plays of 40 yards or more. That's almost 2 a game. And they are right now this season tied for 15th with 5 plays of 50 yards or more. That means they basically in 6 games had 1 game on average that they didn't have a 50-yard gain. Like, this is who they are. And it's simple, Trev, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on this one after showing why we've talked about it. If they can't rip off big plays, they're not scoring. Like, they're just not capable of it. They're not a methodical offense. They will make mistakes. And, again, if they can't rip off big plays, they're not scoring. And perfect example, the Virginia Tech game. 1 carry of over 10 yards in that game by Hollywood Smothers. Only 3 completions of 20 yards or more in that game. That was it. Longest play of the game was 27 yards. They scored 20 points. Was it 20? Was it
21?
21 points. Yeah, 21 points. And real quick, it wasn't a game where they turned it over a bunch. 0 turnovers in that game. Scored 21 points. Why? Because Virginia Tech didn't let them hit the big plays.
Flat out. I agree. And you get into the conversation of how do you limit the big plays? Well, one of the ways to do that is you make them one-dimensional. And one of the things that I really wanted to talk about in these keys was we've talked a lot about Justin Jolly and Noah Rogers and CJ Bailey as a passer, but one of the most underrated parts of their offense has been their running back, Hollywood Smothers. And he is somebody that he's averaging 6.9 yards a carry. He has 100 attempts on the season for 693 yards, 5 rushing touchdowns, I think. And you go and you look at his effectiveness as a runner. Now, one of the weird things is, Brian, you talked about it yesterday, but there are some games where they just don't elect to run him, which is just not run him, but utilize the rushing attack more than what they should. But Hollywood Smothers is a player that can absolutely hurt you in both phases. He has 32 missed tackles forced on the season. Now, I know he's played 1 more game than Jeremiah Love. He has, I think, 20 some odd more carries than Jeremiah Love, but he still has 10 more missed tackles forced. It just goes to show you that this is an elusive running back.
You know what else it shows you? I'm sorry. Keep going.
No, you're good, man. It's just if NC State is able to remain balanced, again, we talk about big play offense, and I think people associate that immediately with, man, they're just ripping bombs downfield all day long. Well, they have a lot of explosive running plays as well. Like I said, they have 34 run plays of at least 10 yards on the season. But what did Virginia Tech do, to your point, Brian? They limited Hollywood Smothers from bursting that game open. He had one.
Yep.
They scored 21 points of offense. Making them one-dimensional is huge.
And, Trev, to your point, what was his yards per carry average against East Carolina? He actually carried the ball a lot that game. Carried the ball 22 times, but only had 76 yards, 3.5 per carry. So here's an example of what Trev's talking about. Hollywood Smothers, 76 rushing yards, 3.5 yards per carry. NC State scored 24 points. Hollywood Smothers, 67 yards on 16 carries, 4.2 per carry. They scored 21 points. Against Virginia, 140 yards, 8.2 per carry, 35 points. Wake Forest, 164 yards, 6.8 per carry. They scored 34 points. Duke game, 123 yards, 7.2 per carry. They scored 33 points. Campbell, 123 yards on 4 carries. They scored 56 points. When Hollywood Smothers gets going, their offense gets going. If he can't, and that puts him in a lot more long-distance situations, I love C.J. Bailey. He's a heck of a player. You know that. But when you can get him behind the sticks, you can force him into some mistakes. And that's what Notre Dame is going to have to do in this game. They're going to have to find ways to get C.J. Bailey in uncomfortable situations. We'll talk more about that later. But you want to make them one-dimensional. It's not about making C.J. Bailey beat you. It's about getting them in uncomfortable situations and preventing them from just being able to stay in front of the sticks. Because as you pointed out multiple times, Trev, when they are able to hit those big plays and then Hollywood gets going, their offense is hard to keep off the field. Very hard to keep off the field. When they are not able to get the run game going and then they have to rely on the big plays, it's easier to limit those big plays. And we could have actually gone the other way around. We maybe should have and talked about, shutting the run game down first, making them one-dimensional, and then talk about that leading to the big plays. But if Hollywood gets going and then you have to start bringing a Don Schuler downhill more to stop the run, now all of a sudden they're in some more favorable matchups down the field, and that's when they start hitting those big plays in the pass game. You can live with 1 or 2 of those. You can't let them get 4, 5, 6 big plays like we saw earlier in the year. That's what makes you a little bit nervous about this matchup, but it's also why you got to be more aggressive. But if you can shut down the run game, which Notre Dame's been pretty good at this year, like I keep seeing people complain about, well, one of the issues with the defense this year is their D-line's undersized. And I'm like, well, wouldn't that only make sense if teams are running on them? I mean, Miami ran well in the first quarter. That was it. Arkansas ran well in the first half, but one of those was one of the reasons for that was a 54-yard gain where he ran outside away from the defense. Like, it wasn't like they were just killing them all game with the running backs. 126 yards in the first half, 54 of them came on a quarterback keeper where the defensive end just did the wrong thing. So, and again, it wasn't great, but they weren't just like getting destroyed in the run game. They have a pretty good run defense this year. You got to make sure that continues. You can't let NC State be balanced because then CJ can do the play action, he can do the bootlegs, and that's when he gets really dangerous. When he's thrown on 2nd and 4, that's when I get nervous. And that's when 3rd and 1, that's when you start saying, boy, there's a lot of things they can do right now on 3rd and 1 with that kid at quarterback, and so got to really make him one-dimensional.
You mentioned something that I wanted to bring up and talking about how if you're able to shut down Hollywood Smothers, you put C.J. Bailey in a spot where he's uncomfortable, which is also our 4th key to victory for this defense. When I remember going back and looking, all 4 of C.J. Bailey's interceptions came between 0 and 19 yards on throws between 0 and 19 yards. Those are factors of the run game not able to get going. He starts to force passes over the middle. His interceptions aren't, he's throwing up a 35, 40-yard bomb and it, gets picked off in a jump ball situation. It's not necessarily that. It's when the run game isn't able to get going, C.J. Bailey starts to force the issue a little bit. That's one aspect of making him uncomfortable. But, Brian, with this also being our 4th key to victory, what are some other aspects of making C.J. Bailey uncomfortable besides just making this offense one-dimensional?
Well, make him think. I think one of the advantages of a team that does run a lot of different coverages, if you're smart with it, is you can show one thing and do something different. This is a situation where, bring that boundary safety downhill and let him rob underneath. And then CJ's going to think he's throwing a front side dig and it's going to get stepped in front of, mixing up your pressure packages. Where's the pressure going to come from? He's still a young quarterback. He's going to make protection call mistakes. He's not going to see a guy coming off the back. He's not going to see a Leonard Moore cornerback fire that hopefully comes off the edge and it doesn't try to bring him through the A gap against a guard. But bringing him off the blind side, where you slant across the guy's face, the tackle's face, and let Leonard come off of him. This is a game where you want to have him thinking about, oh, shoot, Kingston Villiamas is coming right at my face, or Drake Bowen's coming right up my face. It's about getting pressure on him with your front four. It's about mixing up your coverages. What you don't want him to do is feel like he can sit back, gather step, and then go through his progressions. You want to speed everything up, to your point, Trevor. When you can speed things up and make him think, hey, the pressure's coming, I got to get rid of the ball quickly, that's when he starts rushing throws, getting the ball out a little bit quickly. This also goes back a little bit to the offense, to where, part of this key to victory, Trevor, isn't even on the defense. It's on the offense. And if you're off, if CJ Bailey gets into a situation where he feels like, shoot, we got to outscore this team, we got to score every time we touch the football, then because of your offense, your Notre Dame offense is out there scoring every time they touch the football, he'll start forcing plays because he's a young quarterback, but he's very talented. And when he gets into that kind of that, okay, I got to be Superman mode, that's when he starts making mistakes. But beyond that, even more practically speaking, he's got to have uncomfortable footwork. You can't let him sit in the pocket and just, because he's so long. He's got super long legs. When he drops, he gets really good depth, and he kind of sit back there. But you've got to make him feel like, I got to get back to the top of that drop, and if this ball doesn't come out right away, I get nervous because the pressure's coming to me. And that's why I think the game plan has to be as aggressive as we talked about, Trevor, because you can't let him sit back and feel like I can sit here and go through my progressions, or I can step into this deep shot, because he's got a big arm. I mean, he'll launch one down the field. He's got a big arm. You want him thinking, hey, I better speed up my arm motion because I'm going to get it, or hit him a few times. That post route ball, shoot, I'm glad that they got that sack, or they hit him before he threw it, because so-and-so was open by 3-4 yards. That's going to happen. But if he doesn't have time to get there, or doesn't, gets hit as he throws, and all of a sudden he's going to miss those shots. But it's like we saw last week with Maddox Madsen. Now, CJ Bailey's a much more accurate passer than Maddox Madsen. But the point is, if he's having to slide step and step away from pressure and avoid this, he will be less accurate, because that makes him the same as every other quarterback that's ever played football ever. The more you get them out of their comfort zone, the less effective they are. The more you hit them, the more you make them think, I got to avoid this guy and that guy, the more chances they're going to be less accurate. And that's no different with CJ Bailey. And as talented as he is, he's, like I said, he's still human and he's still young. And that's something, that they're going to have to do a good job of. Now, this doesn't mean that you blitz him all day, because if you look at PFF, he's actually thrown for 1,047. He's thrown for 613 yards, 6 touchdowns, 1 pick, and he's completed 72.3% of his throws when he's blitzed. But when he's under pressure, he's thrown 4 touchdowns and 4 picks. He's thrown for 393 yards on 50 attempts, 7.9 yards per attempt. It's not just about blitzing. You got to get home with those blitzes. And you've got to show him pressure and then smoke and bring somebody else. But your front four also is going to have to be effective in this game, which goes back to the matchups we talked about. Boubacar is going to have to be effective. This is a game that I hope Jared Dawson is able to have an impact rushing the quarterback. Jason Onye is going to have some pressure, because when you're facing a kid that's 6'6", you want to try to get as much pressure in his face as possible. So that's where the linebacker pressure's got to hit home, and your D tackle's got to make an impact as well. But the more comfortable when he's kept clean, he's completing 80.1% of his passes, 9 touchdowns, no picks, and 9.3 yards per attempt, according to Pro Football Focus. That's where you want to be.
Yeah, I would say so. Brian, last key to victory for this Notre Dame defense, they have to tackle well. Tackle is what you put verbatim in
Yeah.
in the outline. That you
Talk about
sent
it,
me
Trev,
over.
because I know you've that key was in there. I was going to go with it anyway, but that's something that you talked about when we were going through it. So talk about it. I mean, this ties into a lot of the other things. I think this ties into the run game key, the big play key, but it's huge, man.
We have raved a lot about NC State's skilled players' ability to make plays in space, and I went through and I looked at some of the numbers as to why. And in the receiving game, they've forced 28 missed tackles. In the rushing game, they've forced 57 missed tackles. Running back Hollywood Smothers has 32 of those. This is a team where and we've seen it on film. They did it against Duke. They did it against Virginia. They tried to do it at times against Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech tackled extremely well. And they obviously did it against Campbell. NC State skilled players are really good at turning 2-yard gains into 15-yard gains off of one missed tackle. They're explosive athletes. When you have a combined 85 missed tackles forced through 6 games, you're averaging slightly over 14 a game. That is an electric group of skilled players. Some people will write that off. Oh, it's NC State. It's not, they have good players, but it's not Jeremiah Smith. It's not Ryan Williams. It's not Jeremiah Love. I'm here to tell you that this is an explosive group of skilled players. And one of the more explosive group of skilled players that Notre Dame is going to face for the rest of the season. They're going to have to tackle well. You can't reverberate back to who you were in the first couple weeks. Notre Dame missed 21 tackles through their first 2 games. That has been cleaned up since. But you can't reverberate back to who you were, because now this is, again, we're using this term a lot today. This is another litmus test to see where you're at defensively, because the skilled players that you're tackling against NC State are a little bit different than the skilled players, with all due respect to Purdue and Boise State, and to a degree, some at Arkansas. This is a little bit different of a test. Notre Dame has to bring their feet. They have to drive with their hips. They have to tackle well. They have to win at the point of attack. Hollywood Smothers isn't a big running back. He's like 5'11", 205 pounds, kind of your prototypical size running back for college. But it's players like Justin Jolly. If he catches anything over the middle, you can't let him fall forward for an extra 3 to 4 yards. That could be the difference between a 4th down and a 1st down. That could be the difference between 3rd and 5 and 3rd and 1. So they're going to have to tackle well and win at the point of attack. It's going to be really crucial in this game, because these are explosive skill players.
So if you look at it, Trev, and I took all their all the missed tackles forced in the past game, and then I took their top 2 running backs. Their top 2 running backs in 6 games have had 46 missed tackles forced. Notre Dame's top 2 backs in 5 games have forced 36. And so if you give Notre Dame an extra game, that's not getting them to 46. Now, again, Notre Dame hasn't played a Campbell. They haven't played, a couple of, they haven't played in East Carolina. I mean, they've played some games that are, Wake Forest, but still, I don't care who you're playing. Those are good numbers. Pass game wise, NC State's at 28 missed tackles forced. Notre Dame's at 24. That's the one area where Notre Dame, if they had the same number of games at the same rate, would have slightly more. But overall, that's and I didn't even count the 9 missed tackles that CJ Bailey is forced, and that's been an issue for Notre Dame in the last couple weeks, is not being able to get to the quarterback in the backfield. It also includes that. If you get a shot to sack CJ Bailey, bring him down, and create those negatives, because if you start creating negatives against this team, they're cooked. They're done. But this is a team, Trev, that will make you miss. Look, I get it. I get it. I've been doing this long enough to understand that people just see the name on the jersey, or like the helmet, the logo on the helmet, and they just make assumptions about, well, they're not Ohio State, they're not Oregon, they're NC State. They're not good. They're not okay. Fine. It's like I was having a debate with somebody last week who was trying to tell me that Boise State's defense wasn't very good, and I was pointing to how they performed against Air Force, and Air Force is not good. I'm like, well, Air Force as a team isn't good, but their offense has scored like over 30 points every game they've played. Like, that's a good offense. But it's Air Force, so you're just not going to win that argument. And with some people, it's the same thing with NC State. Oh, it's NC State. If those guys were that good, they'd be at Clemson or Georgia. Or not always. Go look at the NFL draft. The thing that I look at it and say is their team is not nearly as good as Notre Dame's. But they absolutely have some players at certain spots that are very good football players that I would be more than happy to see them transfer to Notre Dame. Like if Noah Rogers jumped in the portal or Terrell Anderson jumped in the portal, I'd be like, I'd look at him. You know, if Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price go pro and Hollywood Smothers jumps in the portal, I'd have a conversation about it. Like, you know, I mean, it's like if CJ Carr was eligible to go to the draft, and let's say he left from the NFL draft and CJ Bailey jumped in the portal, I'd look at him. There's a lot of guys like that on this offense. And that makes them dangerous. And I hope the Notre Dame players have more respect for for this NC State group of skill players than does the Notre Dame fan base, as by and large. And that's just kind of how it is. And I get it. These are legit athletes. That doesn't mean Notre Dame can't shut them down, because Indiana had legit athletes last year too, and they scored 3 points against the Notre Dame starting defense. Basically, they scored 2 garbage touchdowns late in the game. You know, Georgia had legit athletes last year. Notre Dame held them to 10 points. Like, you can shut them down, but you've got to be on top of your game. And the one thing you can't do is when you got a shot to tackle Hollywood Smothers for -2, it's got to be -2. When you have a shot, shot at him at +2, you got to bring him down at +2. You can't let him make you miss on 2nd and 10. And instead of a 2-yard gain to make a 3rd and 8, he makes you miss at linebacker, and it's now 3rd and 3. Like, you've got to make those plays. And I'll say this, the biggest key to making this happen, limiting the big plays, being good at tackling and all that, the front has to play well. That's where Notre Dame has the big advantage talent-wise. They are better than NC State in the skill. I love Noah Rogers. I love Terrell Anderson. I love Keenan Jackson. They're not better talents than Christian Gray, Leonard Moore, and Dallas Golden, and Tay Johnson, and Adon Schuler. They're not, but they're close enough to where if the quarterback has all day to throw, and you're not playing smart, sound football, they will hurt you. I don't think Mario Craver's a better talent than Christian Gray either, but he was that day. But your front has to be impactful. You've got to give them the tools to be impactful, meaning it's not just asking them to do 4-man pressures all day like you did in the past, but you've got to win up front. Drake's got to make plays in this game. Kingston's got to make plays in this game. Allsburg's got to make plays in this game. Bubakar's got to have a big day. We need Burnham and Bryce and Botelho to make plays. You need the D tackles to make plays. That's the area where there's a much bigger talent gap, in my opinion, is in the trenches. And if Hollywood Smothers is having to bounce a run -3 behind the line of scrimmage, and now it's about Drake and Kingston and Jalen and Tay flowing to the ball, you're done. If he's got to jump cut back at -3 behind the line of scrimmage because Gabriel Rubio blew up the guard and he's got to declare, you're cooked. I mean, that's where you're in trouble. And if they can do that, then I think this team is going to be able to keep NC State under 20. They can, but it's not going to be easy because it's a talented team. And if you aren't, and I'll say this, Trev, first 2 games of the year, the tackling for this team was atrocious. It's been really good. The last 3 games, everywhere except one spot, they keep missing the freaking quarterback. But other than that, this team has tackled extremely well the last 3 weeks. So kudos to the coaching staff of making that improvement, because they were abysmal at tackling. But this is also a different skill test than what you faced the last 3 games. Boise had good athletes. Arkansas had good athletes. I like Omega Blake. He's not as good as the kids they're going to face this week. Just not.
Agreed. You and I see that the exact same. Brian, I do believe we have a super chat.
I don't think we're going to have a mailbag today, Trev, because we only got 1 question since then. So we have super chat. We'll answer that super chat, and then we'll get out of here.
From V1, rotate V2. Appreciate the super chat. 2nd week in a row where we've seen some quarterback trick play on the goal line against us.
It's a good observation. I don't remember the one. I think he's thinking of Purdue.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the goal line. That was more in the red zone.
Yeah. And I
think that says something, Trevor.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because one thing, Miami and A&M ended up running it in, but remember, like, Notre Dame stuffed them like several times before they got in.
Yeah,
I think that's teams realizing, like, hey, this team's pretty stout in that situation, but they're also undisciplined on the edges, so we have chances to get to that play.
On that goal line play, they ran in. I saw them. They ran in Armel Mukum and Sean Sevillano as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I saw. Yeah, yep. So, and then just real quickly, for Super Sports Central, what is the status of Jagasol? Any update on a potential return? Notre Dame hasn't said anything about his return. They haven't said anything about when he'll be back or anything like that. But John Bryce, I believe, has reported that it's unlikely he returns for the regular season. And John Bryce is not someone who puts stuff out there like that if he doesn't have a very good source on it. So if John Bryce put it out there, then somebody reliable. So now guys heal differently. So if Charles comes back and for the Syracuse game, it doesn't mean John Bryce was wrong. It means Charles' body healed quicker after they cleaned some things out. That's what that means. But right now, from what I think it's John Bryce is reporting, it's that he's most likely not going to be back for the regular season. And if it does, it's the last couple games. So I would not be expecting that anytime soon. From what, again, I have been told that's not my reporting. That's John's reporting. But like I said, I'm only repeating it because I trust John. And when he reports something like that, he doesn't just throw stuff up against the wall. Or I heard from someone who heard from someone who heard from someone that he's out. John's not putting that stuff out there. If he put it out there, he got it from a very good source. And so I would just kind of work with that as being the reality. But Notre Dame hasn't said anything official on it.
Well, good deal. Well, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the Irish Breakdown podcast. Now, in a couple hours here, actually in about 2 hours, I think exactly, IB Nation Sports Beat is going live, I believe, for their midweek mailbag. Brian and I will be back tomorrow. We're going over our predictions, and then we're also talking game wreckers, and then we have a huge slate of college football this weekend to talk about. Really excited to dive into that.
It's going to be
so much fun.
That's all you're going to be doing tomorrow is talking about college football games. We're going to do it on our show and then going to do it on the evening show as well. So hey, there you go.
Not upset about that, man. Love to talk ball. We've got a full slate of it tomorrow. But on your way out of here, folks, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Also, make sure that you're subscribed to the CFB Nation channel. Whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So until tomorrow, that's Brian. I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.